Hello everybody. Thanks for visiting my YouTube channel. I'm talking a little quietly today because a family member is asleep and I don't want to wake them. But I want to address our listener's comment. I just want to welcome this listener and thank him for his ideas. But there's some misconceptions in his comment and I'd like to address them for him. This comment was made on episode 23 by a I.O. Kane. His first statement is, in my opinion, you have some logical fallacies of your own. You seem to state at the onset that the claim that deputy authority is biblical is, quote, a little invalid, unquote. What does this even mean, in parentheses, because what authority is revealed in the Bible is not explicitly called, quote, deputy authority, unquote. The Godhead is not a, quote, Trinity, unquote, in the Bible. Does that also render Trinitarianism invalid? Clearly it doesn't. Well, probably my choice of words could have been a little better than a little invalid. What I meant was misleading. Yes, God bestows authority, but I don't believe it can be called a deputy authority. There's a connotation in the word deputy that implies that the deputy is more on the level of God than authorities really are. Again, this idea of deputy authority, the way the Lord's Recovery conceives it, is that it's all going to lead up to this minister of the age person, like Witness Lee or Watchman Nee. And there is status in the word deputy authority, implying that they're on the inside with the top authority in some kind of way that is really not true for authorities that God sets up. So I believe the term is misleading. Okay, then the next paragraph, the listener says, you also seem to be suggesting that the idea of deputy authority be discarded because, quote, in this day and age, unquote, there is no objective standard by which such authority can be reliably recognized. If this is the case, we should also discard the different gifted persons mentioned in Ephesians 4. By what objective standard do we recognize prophets, shepherds, teachers, and evangelists, since we don't have any objective standard to know whether an evangelist is actually an evangelist? Shall we discard the matter entirely? Well, I think you're missing the point here because it's not necessary for any of us to recognize an evangelist. An evangelist can do his job without any of us recognizing it. A teacher can teach without any of us recognizing that he or she is a teacher. Of course, we probably will, but it's not required. You can get shepherded by someone without actually recognizing that they are a shepherd. But you cannot be under authority with someone without recognizing that they are an authority. So recognition is required for authorities in a way it's not required for these other things. Further, authority is more of a black and white kind of issue. There is a necessity for some agreement on whether somebody has authority or not for the authority to be effective. Person can teach and only some people can think they are a teacher, but if someone is an authority, by definition, that is requiring a certain amount of agreement and recognition of that person by a group, perhaps a very large group, that they are indeed an authority. And by definition, because of the nature of authority, people that don't recognize the authority are susceptible to disdain by those who do. Whereas if somebody's a teacher and some people prefer not to be taught by that teacher, it's less likely for there to be some problems there. But authority, by its very nature, is something that directs people to do certain things. And there's an insistence to it and a requirement to it that all the other gifts do not necessitate. The second thing is the idea of this deputy authority, this minister of the age authority, is so far-reaching and with such far-reaching consequences that in order to establish it, in order to live under it and have it as a reality, we better be pretty darn sure this person is who we think he is. And my point is we don't have any way of knowing that. The authority that Witness Lee expected us to recognize in the minister of the age was huge, with huge consequences, because it leads to lines being drawn. Just look at the Lord's recovery. They don't respect anybody that doesn't follow Witness Lee because it's such a huge deal that he's a minister of the age. And so I don't think that can work without some kind of very, very clear way of determining who this person is. And it doesn't exist. So I don't think it works. And in fact, history and the current events show that, because the Lord's Recovery wants to recognize Witness Lee as the minister of the age, but very few other people do. And the Lord's Recovery is a very small minority. And so they've divided themselves from the rest of Christianity, and they've drawn battle lines based upon Witness Lee. And they, in a very, very irrational and unreasonable way, expect everybody to recognize him like they do. And it's just unreasonable to expect that. Okay, let's move on to the last paragraph. He says, finally, you say that, quote, where they are trying to get to, unquote, is related to claiming authority over others. You then say it is up to any individual to follow whom they wish to follow. Do you think that the article disputes this point? What I see is a presentation of the biblical basis for deputy authority and some points related to it, such as how it is manifested and what believers' attitudes toward it should be, all supported with Scripture. If anything, the article seems to support your point by offering scriptural principles by which believers can both know and identify deputy authority in the body. Unless I missed it, it does not make a claim about who is or who was such a one, but leaves the matter to the reader's discernment according to the principles presented. In short, you created the straw man. Well, the first thing is you talk about the biblical basis for deputy authority. I still don't believe there is any, in the sense of where they're taking it, okay, which is taking it to the minister of the age level. You also say it's all supported by Scripture. I don't believe it is all supported by Scripture, the way they implement it, again, going to the minister of the age level. I don't think that is supportable by Scripture at all. But again, the point is that the article doesn't make the claim, but that's what the Lord's Recovery believes. And the Lord's Recovery would not bother with this deputy authority idea if they weren't going to take it to the minister of the age level. They're not interested in validating policemen or city council members or the greeter at Walmart. They're interested in validating the minister of the age. That's where all this leads. And they wouldn't even bother with this article if that wasn't what was at stake. So I think really the straw man is on your side because you're being oblique to that fact. This is the whole problem I have with it, is this idea of deputy authority is all set up and put forth and supported by the Lord's Recovery in order to eventually support this idea of the minister of the age, and thereby to control others, to say you need to submit to the minister of the age. And yes, indeed, they do want to claim authority over others. They expect their followers to submit to this authority, and they threaten them if they do not. And they warn them about leaving the Lord's Recovery and getting out from under this authority, tell them bad things will happen to them and they shouldn't do it. And it's all this threat of this authority that is not healthy, and that is what I'm speaking against. So thank you, sir, for your comments. I hope I answered your questions. That's it for today. Take care.